Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shivala Prabhu, for filling in. My apologies, a little bit of a technical glitch, but without wasting much time, let's get right into the subject here today. So, we are going to be discussing chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a very important chapter. Srila Prabhupada, very interestingly, titles the chapter 2 as Contents of the Gita Summarized. That's not usually how many of the translators of the Bhagavad Gita try to entitle this particular chapter. But this is very interesting, and let's see as to why he does so. And before I get into it, as Bhagavad Gita begins, Shivala Prabhu was explaining about the chapter 1 and its summary. Bhagavad Gita begins with the first verse, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mahamaka Pandavascheva Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, Kim Akurvata? What did they do? And what was the first statement that he said? Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva Yutsavaha. They have come there to fight. Yutsavaha is to fight, they have come. Now he has himself said that they have come there to fight. And then he is asking a question, what did they do? Having come to fight, they should be fighting. What else would they do? Right? So that is where the whole, the theme of Bhagavad Gita begins as Dhritarashtra starts the question. And then there is a very similar incident that happens as it moves into the middle of the first chapter. After all of the observation by Duryodhana happens through the entire, of his phalanx of armies, and then he walks up to each one of the great personnel there, and then everybody blows their conch shell. The war is just supposed to begin. And when all of them have blown their conch shell, it should be fight. But what does Arjuna do? He does something very different there. And that is something that was not quite expected by Krishna. So what did he say? He said, let me see those who have come here to fight, wishing to please the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra. That is the point that Arjuna wants Krishna to look at that point in time. And Krishna, makes a very short smile there. And then he takes Arjuna right in between. And he looks at the great assembled Kurus there, especially Bhishma Pitama. And in fact, he takes the Rath right in front of Bhishma Pitama and Dronacharya, because he knows Arjuna's weak points are those two great personalities there. Why? Drona was his teacher, and Bhishma was his most favorite grandfather, the one who took care of them right from their childhood. And Krishna says, just behold, Partha, all the Kurus assembled here. And then this is what Krishna's mind is going into. He says, did Arjuna want to stop there and not fight? Is that the reason why he brought me in between these two armies? Krishna never expected such things from the son of his aunt, Pruta. In fact, in this place, he refers to Arjuna as Partha, which means son of Pruta, which is Kunti, right? Which means he was very related to Krishna. And he didn't expect something like that coming in from somebody of his own family, that, after deciding to fight, he is still indecisive about what he wants to do. And then it says that the mind of Arjuna was thus predicted by Lord in a very friendly, joking way. Yesterday, there was a very interesting question that came about as to why Bhagavad Gita in the midst of so much violence, right? And a lot of questions, not just one, but quite a few of you asked this question. And it's a very relevant and interesting question that all of you asked, right? And I was just kind of doing a little bit of looking around. In the 10th chapter, 5th verse, Srila Prabhupada defines ahimsa, right? And he says, ahimsa, non-violence, means that one should not do anything which will put others into misery or confusion. Now, the breadth of ahimsa is kind of widened here in this definition. Now, ahimsa necessarily is not referring to killing people, but here it is talking about causing misery or confusion to others, number one. Next, ahimsa means that people should be trained in such a way that the full utilization of the human body can be achieved. Now, he's talking about something higher than the purpose of misery and confusion in the minds of people. He's talking about the utilization of human body for a higher purpose. That's point number 2. The human body is meant for spiritual realization. What is the purpose of the human body is being defined here? And he says, any movement or any commissions which do not further that end commit violence. Which means if there is any path that is taken, and if that path does not lead to the ultimate goal of spiritual realization, for which purpose we have all been given this human body. That is violence. That's quite interesting to see this, definition that Srila Prabhupada gives in there. But we will kind of, get into this as we go into this chapter, because this is how the whole chapter is laid out. Now, what is the second chapter about? The second chapter enters with a dilemma. What is the dilemma? The dilemma is about whether Arjuna wants to fight or not to fight. That's the whole question. Now, there was another question yesterday in the forum, right? Now, why are we talking about fighting and why are we talking about Bhagavad Gita? They seem to be two different things. Bhagavad Gita is something that is for somebody who wants to get into a serene life. And here we are talking about fighting and war field and hundreds of thousands of people being killed. What is the relevance here, right? And what is the dilemma really, right? We can see that our situation that we are in is very similar to what Arjuna was in. Now, there was also another question yesterday as to why was Arjuna being selected for this purpose of delivering the Bhagavad Gita, right? That was a question that was coming in. And the answer is, Krishna could have chosen Yudhishthira, he could have chosen Bhima or any of them, but he chose, in fact, Yudhishthira was Dharmaraja. Ideally, to establish the Dharma, he could have picked up Dharmaraj Yudhishthira, but he picked up Arjuna. Some of the reasons that came up is that Arjuna was a middle-aged person. When you look at the whole Pandavas, he was the one right in the middle. So he was, like any of us in the, the mid-30s or so on, right? He was a grahastha, right? Just like any of us, he's not a sannyasi, or he's not somebody who is like, completely given up everything. He is very much, he's a fighter, he's a kshatriya. So this is what we do in our daily lives, right? We fight amongst, various situations within our life, right? So if you look at fighting in the war field is very much similar to the kind of the fight that we go through within our mind. So it's very relevant as to what is being said here and what we are going to be discussing through the entire Bhagavad Gita here. Now, with that said, what was the prelude to this? We see that in the previous chapter, just give me one moment as I move this. So in the previous chapter, we saw that there were some reasons that Arjuna was actually trying to find, right? He actually decided that he did not want to fight. And that's the reason why he took Krishna right in between the two armies, which means the decision was already taken. And then what is he trying to do? In discussion with Krishna, he is trying to find reasons why he does not want to fight. And this is a very similar situation. Most of us, we have already made up our minds for certain decisions and certain actions that we want to take. And then we find reasons as to why we don't want to do it or why we want to do it, right? And let's see as to what are the reasons that Arjuna found as to why he did not want to fight, right? We see that it says compassion for friends and relatives, no enjoyment, even if he was victorious. What enjoyment could I get by killing my own people? This is not something that I want. So we can see how elevated Arjuna was. And that is one of the reasons also as to why Krishna chose Arjuna to give, because he was such a very nice person at heart. He did not want to enjoy something just by killing others, even if it means that getting a great kingdom. In fact, he says that in the Bhagavad Gita in the first chapter by saying that, oh, even if I'm getting the 3 worlds, I'm not interested in the 3 worlds, right? I'm happy with this. In fact, he goes one step forward. He says, even if it means that I don't have a kingdom, they're not ready to give me even 5 inches of land, what to speak of the whole kingdom, right? Duryodhana refused to give anything at all. He said, I'm ready to even beg and live my life. Now, is that possible for a Kshatriya? We see a very interesting incident. Bhima, once when they were in the forest, we see that Draupadi was trying to, Bhima and Draupadi were spending some time alongside a river, and they found a very beautiful lotus there, a 1,000-petaled lotus, right? And as soon as Draupadi saw that, her attention went into it and said, wow, I've never seen such a lotus in my life. I'm sure if I take this lotus and offer it to Yudhishthira Maharaj, he would be very happy. I wish to do so. Bhima, can you help me? Can you get me more of these lotuses? Bhima is, as usual, always ready to do these kind of stuff. He said, yes, let me do that. And he goes into the Gandhamadana mountains, This is a place that is owned by Kuvera and his, people, the Yakshas. And he goes there and he's trying to pick up the lotuses. And then we see that the Yakshas are stopping him. Hey, you cannot pick this up. You have to take permission from Kuvera before you pick up these lotuses. He says, Bhima says to the servants of Kuvera, you know who I am? I'm a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya never begs. He never asks. If he wants, he picks it up. If you want to stop me, you have to fight me. And that is the mood of a Kshatriya. And that is the family of Arjuna. How could Arjuna decide that he wanted to beg and live his life? It's quite unusual of somebody to think even like that. What does this say? This says that even in our own lives, we go through several situations. We could be very intelligent. When situations come for others, we would even be counselors helping them to get out of such situations. But when it comes to our own self, and when we are put in a spot and we have to take a decision, we struggle to take decisions, right? And that's exactly the situation that Arjuna was in, right? That it's not that Arjuna was not intelligent. It's not that he did not know the Shastras. It's not that he did not know what was being said here in the Bhagavad Gita. He very well knew that. But he was representing all of us in the mood of how we are put into such similar situations where we are unable to take decisions, right? And we see that as we enter into the second chapter, the final reason that he gives is indecision, right? Now, what is covered in the second chapter? We see that Krishna answers these 5 questions. What does Krishna do first? He says, okay, is this the 5 reasons that you're giving not to fight? And then, now let me tell you why these 5 reasons are not valid. Let me first answer that question. And then he moves on from there, right? And then this is how the whole chapter 2 is sectionized. We see that there are about 5 sections, and Krishna covers each one of them in a very, very systematic fashion. First, addressing his question, the reasons that he posed as to why he did not want to fight, and then slowly takes him into levels of emancipation, where he explains about karma kanda, and then he talks about nishkama karma, and finally explains, giving a little bit of a peep into the bhakti yoga, which is called as the Sthita Prajna discussion that happens. Now, all of this was a little bit of technical. Shivala Prabhu, when he began the whole session, he was talking about, how do we, if I have to summarize the chapter 2, how can I look it in a very simple way, right? So I just tried to, bring this acronym, which was done by one wonderful devotee, Sutapa Prabhu. He acronized this whole chapter as Gita. And it's very apt because the chapter itself is entitled, Contents of the Gita Summarized. Now, G, what does it refer to? When you are in a situation where you are not able to take a decision, it's better that you don't take the decision, right? Which means what? Like they say in management, right? When you are in a problem, try to put yourself out of the problem, then you can try and solve the problem. If you are part of the problem, it's very difficult for you to solve the problem because you're seeing yourself amongst the things that you're looking at. So try to come out of it, right? And now what Gita says is that instead of you trying to come out of it, which again could mean that you could make mistakes, why don't you approach somebody who can solve your problem better? Because he has solved many problems before in his life, which are similar to what yours is. And that person is the guru. So the first point is about approaching a guru, right? So the G stands for guru, right? Now, what does the guru say? He first gives you who you are. How should you solve the problem? How should you even approach the problem? So he gives you an identity. So that is I. The I stands for identity. And then he tells, after you have identified yourself, what are things that you need to do, right? Which is called as the 2 duties. Now we see the family here on top, which represents the worldly activities that we do as normal people. But then, the other activity is called as the Sanatana Dharma, while the normal activities or the worldly activities that we do is called as the Swadharma. The Sanatana Dharma is the one that need to be added to it. And combination of these 2 activities is what produces A, which is called as Atmarama. So just to kind of summarize, G stands for Guru, that if you are in a state of indecision, that you need to approach a Guru. The Guru helps you find yourself, your identity. He helps you perform what activities should you do to solve your problem. and then come to a situation of a very peaceful mind, which is called as Atmarama. And this is what is the second chapter all about. Now, let's move into the 5 sections, beginning with the section A, wherein verses 2.1 to 10, which covers the continuation of the doubts that he has to say that he does not want to fight. And having decided that, in the verse 7, he talks about, oh, I'm in a very confused stage. I can hear one voice coming in aside. If you could mute that voice, please. Yes, thank you very much. So in the 2.7 verse, Arjuna speaks, Karpanna dosho pahata swabhavaha prachamitvam dharma samudda chetaha yashreyasyan nischitam bruhitan me sishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. This is a very important and a very interesting verse, and it has loaded meanings into it, right? He says first, Karpanna dosho. The word Karpanya comes from the word Kripana. Kripana means a miserly person. He says, now I am confused about my duty having and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. He says, I have become a miser in terms of my thinking capacity. I'm not able to utilize I have the capacity to think, but at present, I'm not in a position to use my ability to think. So that is called as Karpanna dosha, or miserly weakness. Then he says, yes, Shreyaha, now you please tell me that I do not know what to do. Tell me what is the best thing to do, right? Don't give me something that is interim or something that is an interim solution or an immediate solution. Give me the ultimate solution by which I can solve this problem. So he says, Shreyaha. And then he says, Sishyasteham, I am surrendering unto you. I become your disciple. And he says, Prapannam, you please instruct me. Now, all the conversation that has been happening between the first chapter and all the way till now has been a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, in the mood that Krishna was Arjuna's friend, relative, and a very, very close relationship. Now, the mood suddenly changes completely into a different mood here. What happened? Arjuna became a disciple, and Krishna is the one who's going to instruct, which means he becomes the guru. Now, guru is going to speak to his disciple. Now, what should be the tone of the guru when he speaks to his disciple? Let's see that, right? And before we move into that, I just wanted to kind of cover, we saw that a man in material perplexity is the one who's called as the one who is called Karpanna dosha, which means the inability to think even though he has the capacity to think. What does it really mean? It means that human beings have the capacity. Yesterday, explaining the chapter 1, it was described, ahara nidra bhayamaytunam cha, that is eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. These are common between human beings and animals. What is that? That is very special. Dharmo hi tesham adhikaha. Dharma is something that is special for human beings. Adhikaha, it says, that is 1 plus. And not only that, it says Visheshaha, it is very, very special. Why? Because if the animals want to do dharma, they cannot do it. But human beings can do it. But dharmena hinaha, but if the dharma is not present in human beings, pashubihi samanaha, they are as good as animals. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada refers that if a person is not taking up to dharma, he is as good as an animal, which means he's a two-legged animal, which means he's not fulfilling the purpose of why he has been given this human body. And that person is called as a Kripana. And the opposite of that is a Brahmana. Why a Brahmana? The word Brahmana means Brahmam charati iti Brahmana, means he is going after Brahman, inquiring into Brahman. And where does the Vedic literature begin? He says, Atato Brahma Jigyasha. If you take the Vedas, the first aphorism explains that one has to understand what is Brahman, or one should be in that path to understand. Right? Now, where do these material perplexities come from? Right? Are we, making these perplexities, or where do they come from? And the example is given in the Bhagavad Gita. It says that it's like forest fire. If you have to find out where the forest fire originated, it's very difficult to find. So these perplexities in our life, perplexities in our life, they really not invited. They happen. Why? Because it's the law of karma. Now, I'm not going to get into the subject of karma. It's a very vast subject that we're going to be dealing with in the next chapter, right? So they do come. And how they come? It just comes, and it's very difficult to figure out. I think what is important is when there is forest fire, I think it's a better idea to think about how to get out of the forest fire than to figure out and stay there and find out, oh, where did this fire originate from? Nobody would do that. Anybody who's intelligent, he will just want to get out of that fire. Now, having thus spoken, what did Arjuna do? He said, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Right? And then at that time, Krishna, smiling, midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. And that is where we enter the section B. What did Krishna say? He says, Bhagavan Vacha. Now, the mood of Bhagavan is very different from what he was speaking before. Earlier in the second chapter, he said, Kutastva Kashmalamidam, just like a friend, he was just arguing with him. But now here it is very different. He says, Asocha Nanvasochastvam Prajna Vadam Sabashashe. Hey Arjuna, you're speaking as though you're a very learned person. Gatasun Agatasun sa. Whether one dies or one lives, na anusochanti pandita. A pandita, a person who is learned, he does not lament for this. Ashun gatasun agatasun. He does not lament for this. Where did this lamentation come to you from? You're speaking as though you're a pandita, but this is not what a pandita speaks. And that is a point that Krishna straight away makes. Now, we have to understand what is this gatasun agatasun, right? Which means there is something that they are talking about as the human, right? And there is the body and there is the soul. So let's try and understand a little bit, because this is what is very broadly described in this entire section with various verses, which I'm going to kind of skim through. By the way, I wanted to mention that second chapter that we are discussing is the second longest chapter in the entire Bhagavad Gita. Now, trying to cover this chapter in 1 hour is impossible. And for somebody who is limited, who is still trying to find the essence of what this chapter is, I think we will try and at least swim in the in the surface of the ocean. But of course, if you get deeper into it, you can get some wonderful jewels that come out of under the ocean, right? But let's try and see what is being covered here, right? Here, given a little bit of a pictorial representation of, we see here, if you follow my mouse, we have the soul here, which is the core of the living entity. So we all know that, we have a Atma, which is called as the soul. And then there are two interesting terminologies that are coming in here, which is called as the subtle body and gross body. Usually we have heard about, yes, we have a body, but what is the subtle body and what is this gross body? Now, what you see and feel, this hand, you can feel, you can touch it, you can do it. This is called the gross body, which is called matter. And this is, composed of what elements? 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. These 5 elements compose this body, which is called as the gross body, which is something that you can grossly feel. And then we have the subtle body, which is something that you cannot feel, but it exists. What is that? That is the mind, intelligence, and the false ego, as it is called. Now, don't worry about what is false ego, what is ego. That is going to be very elaborately discussed again as we move into the chapters. So for now, let's just kind of theoretically understand that the gross body consists of 5 elements, the subtle body consists of 3 elements, and then there is prana. Like if somebody dies, they say his prana is gone, right? And there is a life air that is there. And that life air is the one that separates the gross body and the subtle body. And the soul is separated from the gross body through the subtle body. So this is broadly how, how the structure of a human being is, right? This is how a human being lives. Now, what is done between the 11th verse and the 30th verse here in this chapter very vividly describes about the analysis between the body and matter, right? What does Krishna say? Krishna says, all individuals exist eternally and they change bodies, which means what? He says, I existed before, you're existing now, I'm existing now. In the future also we will exist. He first establishes saying that the Atma is permanent. Now, if I existed before and I'm existing now and I will exist later, will I have the same body? No, I might not have the same body. I might have different bodies. So body changes, but the Atma is permanent. So he establishes that. And now, while we are changing these bodies, there are different difficulties that we are going through, which is called as the kleshas, or the 3 kleshas, which is the adhyatmika, adibhautika, adidhaivika, right? To put it in simple terms, difficulties that are caused by our own body, which is disease within the body, difficulties that are caused by other entities, and then difficulties that are caused by natural calamities, like for example, there's a volcano, there is a tsunami, and so on and so forth, right? Now, one who tolerates the dualities of these difficulties that he goes through, that is the person who is eligible for liberation. So here he brings in a very new topic called liberation, right? So we'll come to that again. Then again, he goes back and establishes saying that the soul never dies and the body is perishable. Changing bodies is similar to changing clothes. Now, this is a very interesting analogy that Krishna gives. He says, Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya navani gruhnati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. He says, Vasamsi, this dress is there. Jirnani, when it becomes old, what do? I throw this shirt. This cloth, I throw it away. Then navani gruhnati, which means navani means what? New. I put on new clothes. So when a cloth becomes old, I throw this and I put on new. Similarly, when this body becomes old, which is like a cloth, I have to relinquish this body and I have to accept a new body. And that, he says, is very similar to, even if you look at your own life this time, what is it? You were a little baby as you were born, and then you became a youth, and then you became an old man. And then similarly, when you become old and die, again you will accept a new body. The hinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara. He says you will be a kumara, you will be a yavvana, which means a youth, and then jara means an old person. So like this, body transforms. So the body is transforming even within this lifetime. Similarly, as you move on from one life to other, the body transforms. Then he explains about the qualities of the eternal soul. And then finally, he concludes this section by saying that birth and death are inevitable. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya. He says, Jatasya, the one who is born, he has to die. And the one who dies, he has to be born again. So when this is the situation, what is there in a need for you to lament for the eternal soul? Which means when you're going to kill these people, it is just that they are going to give up their bodies, but they are not going to kill their souls, or you cannot kill their souls. And of course, he says that you cannot kill the soul by water. You cannot kill the soul by wind. You cannot kill the soul by astras, by weapons. Even if there is a nuclear weapon which hits the soul, it cannot kill. Why? Because the soul is so minute. The Upanishads are explaining that what is the size of the soul? Has anybody seen the size of a soul? The size of the soul, it is explained that if you take the tip of your hair, is already very difficult to find the tip of the hair. And if you divide it into 100 times, and then take that 100th piece, and then again divide it into another 100, that is the size of the soul. Now, this is the same soul that pervades the body of a mammoth elephant in Africa, and the one which pervades the body of the coronavirus, which they are still trying to find where it's sitting. Right? It's the same soul, different bodies, different actions, different reactions, but the same soul capable, right? And that is the discussion that's going through the entire section here. So we already looked at these slokas. One important one, 2.14, which I want to cover is, he says, if you look at the previous one, he said, tolerate these dualities. What are these dualities? He says, Sthita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkha. Sthita means what? Cold. Now Dubai is supposedly getting into a cold weather. I mean, of course, don't compare it with any other place that gets cold. But here, cold means like 23, 24, sometimes 16 degrees for a few days, right? So this is Sthita. Ushna, you have to go through Ushna for 8 months. Now, these dualities, can you change? You cannot. Sukha, Dukkha. What should you do? Can you change it? You cannot do. The most that you can do is Titikshashva Bharata, learn to tolerate. In fact, the acharyas are explaining, saying that you have to learn to try to tolerate, because it's not easily something that you can tolerate. So keep trying. Abhyasa yoga yuktena yogam yunjan madashra. He says abhyasa, do practice. Just like in, if you want to learn something, they say, you do abhyasa, it will come. At some point in time, you'll get it. Don't worry, right? So this is the process by which one becomes eligible for liberation. So the eligibility for liberation comes for one who learns how to tolerate. And this is what is explained by the seers of the truth, that the non-existent material body, there is no endurance, which means it's not permanent, but the eternal soul, there is no change, right? And he further explains a lot of this. Of course, this material is going to be available for you in the material space, so please feel free to access it. I'm not going to go through all of this with the limited time that we have. I already explained about this verse. Na jayate na mriyate va kadachin. He says, for the soul there is neither birth or death. For the body, jatasya hi dhruva mrityu. If the body is born, it has to die. But the soul, that's not the same. It's exactly the opposite. Na jayate, mriyate, nayam bhutva. And then he says, ajaha, nityaha, sashvataha. What are the three important qualities of the soul that he explains? He says the soul is unborn, which means the soul is the same. It just transforms from one place to another, but it doesn't change the way it is. Eternal, ever existing, and primeval. These are some of the qualities of the soul that he explains. And then finally concludes in 21 verse by saying it's indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable. So nobody can kill. So just to kind of summarize it, what are the qualities of the soul? We can see that the soul neither takes birth, doesn't die, unborn, eternal, ever existing, primeval, and immutable. Then, whereas the body takes birth, it remains and goes through these 6 transformations. That is, it is born, it remains, it grows, it produces offspring, it dwindles, and finally dies. Is there anybody who has not gone through these 6 transformations? There's nobody. Even if somebody who was just born and at the same moment dies, he has to go through all of these 6 transformations. It's just a question of what is the time between the birth and the death. That is all. But everybody has to go through these transformations, right? So this is what is explained in summary between these verses. Now, we already explained about how this body is like a dress that we change. And then let's understand a little bit of argument that Krishna makes to Arjuna at this point in time. Why is he giving all of these examples? He says, I just mentioned to you about changing these clothes, right? He says, Arjuna should be happy to kill the bodies of grandfather and teacher in a righteous fight so that they can be cleansed of all reactions and get fresh bodies. So he says that by killing, what is going to happen? They are actually going to get better bodies or better clothes. So why are you worried about killing? Go ahead, do it. That is the point that he makes. Now, this can raise eyebrows with us saying, oh, is it as simple as that? Just like changing clothes? Let's try and understand that. And then the next point that he makes is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status. And that is the whole tattva that Krishna is going to deal with as we move through in this chapter and also in the further chapters as we explains about the body and soul, right? Now, I'm going to skip some of this. We already discussed these in summary, and then I'm going to move on to the next section. So this is the characteristics of the soul. This is the characteristics of the soul that we saw, which is about 13 number, which we discussed about. So just a few of them. It cannot be cut into pieces, burnt by fire, moistened by water, withered by wind, unbreakable, insoluble, and so on and so forth. It explains all of these qualities. When I was preparing, my daughter was asking, is it true that there's so many characteristics to the soul? People don't even know where the soul is, but there are like 30 characteristics of the soul. This is interesting. Now, with that, let's move on to section C. So far what we have covered is almost, I would say, 50% of the discussion, right? We summarize the entire chapter 2 into Gita, Gita. G means approaching a guru. We already saw that Arjuna felt that he was indecisive. He was not in a position to take a decision. He wanted help. He sought help from Krishna, taking him as a guru, and said, Krishna, please, guide me as to what I'm supposed to do for the ultimate good. That was the surrender to the guru. So that is G. And then we talked about identity. Now Krishna establishes the identity of Arjuna, that you are not this body, you are the soul. Please understand there is something that is beyond the body that you're seeing in this battlefield amongst all of them who are present, and also your own self. Please understand that. And that is the point that he's saying. Now he gives reasons as to why he should fight. And he begins with this topic called Karma Kanda. And what is that? Now, who is Arjuna, as we discussed in the beginning? We said Arjuna is a Kshatriya. He's a fighter. He's a soldier. What is a soldier supposed to do? He's supposed to fight. A soldier who's standing in the border cannot say, oh, when I look at them, I feel very sorry. It could be my friend, it could be my relative, it could be related to somebody who's my relative, and so on. So I will not fight. If that is the way that the soldier is going to be sitting there, that's not going to help. The duty of a soldier is to fight. And in fact, it will be dishonor if he doesn't fight. Because if a Kshatriya doesn't fight, what will people think is, they will not think about what is going on in his mind, but they will only think that he was a coward. He was not capable enough to fight. And that's why he ran away from the battlefield. It's not because, he was just finding reasons why he did not want to fight. Actually, he did not have the capability to fight, right? And that is what it would come on them, right? So here he says, Swadharma, as a Kshatriya, you're supposed to fight. And in fact, the Kshatriyas invite such opportunities. Why? Because if they win the battle, they will enjoy the kingdom. If they lose the battle and die, they will go to heavenly planets directly without having to perform any kind of, Vedic sacrifices or anything, because their Vedic sacrifice itself is fighting in the battlefield, right? So if you do not perform this religious duty of fighting, it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada writes, and Krishna is mentioning, he says, if you do not perform this religious duty of fighting. Now, yesterday we were talking about why killing, why Bhagavad Gita. And here it is being mentioned that the fighting itself is the religious duty. Why? Because the duty of a Kshatriya is to fight. The Vaishya is to do commerce and take care of the cows, right? The Brahmana is to teach, and the Shudra is to support all the other four classes. This is the nature, and this is why it is religious duty. And then he says, people will always speak of your infamy. In fact, they will dishonor you, saying that you are a coward. In fact, the great generals who are present there, they will not be happy about it. Dronacharya is standing opposite to you. He is the one who taught you how to fight. He is standing right in front of you, wanting to see how you're going to fight. And if you are refusing to fight, do you want to take that infamy? It is better for you to die than to take such infamy. This is what Krishna concludes there. Now, he says, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain heavenly planets, therefore you get up with determination and fight. He says, stand and fight. Now, thus far, Krishna has explained this knowledge in a very analytical way, that he is talking about the soul, he's talking about the body, what happens when you kill, he talks about infamy. So he's trying to analytically study the whole subject matter and present it so that he's trying to see if this logic is trying to be understood by Arjuna, and then he wants to move on to the next course of discussion. And that is where we enter section D. In this section, he is just elevating the discussion to one level up. It's the same karma yoga that he is talking about, but then he adds one additional element to it, which is you're a Kshatriya, you're supposed to fight. Now you are a father, you're supposed to do your duty. You're a mother, you're supposed to do your duty. You're a son, you're supposed to do your duty. So similarly, whatever position that we are in, please continue that duty first. That is important. So that is what was established so far, right? And now what he's trying to say is nish-kama karma. Now we know kama means desire. Nish-kama means no desire. For us to simply understand, do your activity, but don't desire that this is the result that you have to get. Just be detached, from the result. And that is what he is explaining it. Now, a lot of us will have questions, right? Unless I have a goal of what I want to achieve, why should I even do the activity? What is my inspiration? What is my motivation to do something, right? So that question will come. And Krishna is talking about nishkama karma. So how do we understand this? And this is what we will be seeing in this chapter. So just to kind of summarize, he says, thus far I have described the analytical study, which is called Sankhya. Sankhya essentially means numbers. So he is analytically, just like you have data and analytics, business analytics, like that. He is analytically tried to explain it. Now he is going to explain it in terms of fruitive results, which is called as Buddhi Yoga. Now he says, in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution. Now, when you do this nishkama karma, which means not attached, which means what? If you're not attached, you should know why you should not be attached. And that he explains. It's this very famous verse, as childhood, in our childhood, we would have seen this Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, there is the famous title song. What is that? Karmannevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhur ma te sangostva karmani. Then goes the title, Ardhashri Mahabharat Katha. It's kind of a very, when you think about those days when that was the only Mahabharat serial that was going on, you would like run into it and see, wait for the title song to, finish and then get into. Anyway, nostalgic times when we looked into it. Now, that is the verse that Krishna is talking about here. He says, of course, not this verse, we will get to that verse. He says, you perform your duty, karmana eva adhikaraha. That is, you're only entitled to do your activity, ma phaleshu kadachana, not for the result. Why? That result will be given by somebody who is superior to you. And who is that? That is God. He has already determined for this activity what he is supposed to give. But now that you don't have to be attached for the result, that does not mean that you do not perform the activity itself. You have to continue to do your activity. He says, Mate sangostu akarmani. He says, don't stop from doing work. Oh, Krishna will give. I don't have to do anything. Anyway, whatever result is going to come should come. Why am I worried? Let me just sit down and relax. No, that way nothing is going to come, right? And that is the point that he makes here. But by understanding that, we are understanding that there is a superior nature, which is God. Now, and activity that is done with faith, with God, that is called as dharma. And that is what is being explained here. Neha abhikramanasasti pratyavayona vidyate swalpam apyasya dharmasya. And if you do activity like that without being attached to it, trayate mahato bhayat, it will help you in the greatest danger, which means at the time of death, it will help you. Now, the question is, how will it help us, right? The way that it will help us is that if you do an activity that is in surrender or dedication to the Lord, then what happens is that that activity is something, or the result is something that you can carry forward in your next life. So you do 1% activity in this dharma, in this lifetime, then in your next life, you begin with 2%. Whereas no matter how much activity you do here, you can begin with, let's say you're a student, you do your degree, your post-graduation, you do your PhD, you do your double PhD. Recently, I met a friend of mine who did 3 PhDs. I don't know why on earth, doing 1 PhD is like, such a pain, 3 PhDs. And then is already like 50 years of his life is gone, right? Now you can't even take it forward to your next life. You can't take those certificates in the first case. Well, it's all digital, it's all in the cloud. Well, it's still in the cloud, but you can't take it to your next life, right? So that is the nature of activities that we do in the normal world. But if you have to do such kind of activity, what kind of nature should you develop? He says that Vivasai Atmika Buddhi, you have to develop an attitude of determination, that you have to be Ekehe Kurunandana. You should have that single-minded determination. If you simply keep going here and there to find answers to it, Bahushaka, then Buddhayo avyavasayinam, it doesn't become resolute in its purpose. So we keep, searching around things. So what we do typically, we try to find answers. Oh, today I have a problem. Let me go on to this. What is this yogi saying on the YouTube? What is this channel saying about, how to deal with my problem? So we go here and there after it, right? And that is what is being mentioned here. And then he says, why is this happening? Right? Why is that people are always so distracted to so many things? That he explains here by saying, Bhoga Ishwarya Prashaktanam Taya Apakrita Chetasam Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Samadho Na Vidiyate. Why it does not happen? Because they are simply after sense enjoyment and material opulence. He says, Bhoga and Aishwarya. If your focus is only about, it's Corona time, which stock do I invest, which one is going to go up, do I invest in Jet Airways now, is anybody going to really run it, is it really going to fly, those kind of things that we are into, and that is the only thing. It's very difficult now. Come on, Jet Airways, I don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be a meeting happening tonight. Why sit in the Bhagavad Gita class? I would rather go and see if my stock is growing, right? So it's very difficult for one to go between these two. So he says, Bhoga Aishwarya Prashaktana. Prashakta, Ashakti means to get attached. Prashaktana means Prakrishta Rupena Ashakti, means very deeply attachment comes. Because if you get into it, you get deep into it. Even if you want to find your way out, it's very difficult to come out of it, right? And that's how it gets in. And that is being explained here. And then he says, there's another reason why you should not be engaged in this materialistic life, because he says, Trigunna Vishaya Veda. This subject matter is all in the 3 gunas. As long as you are in the 3 gunas, you will not be able to get out of this cycle, because the mode of Raja and Tuma is always going to take you deeper and deeper. So you have to come out. Traigunna Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunyo Babarjana. You have to rise above these modes. Why? Because these modes are nirdvando. They are dvanda, but if you rise above it, you can become nirdvanda, which means that you can get out of the duality. What is the duality? We already, discussed the duality is, we saw Sthita and Ushna, Sukha and Dukkha, which is heat and cold, and then happiness and distress. These dualities we can get out of. But rather, what you should understand is you should know what is the purpose of the Vedas. What is the purpose of the Vedas? That is explained in the 15th chapter by Krishna. He says, Vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyaha. He says, by all the Vedas, what is the ultimate goal to be reached? So he explains that by an example here. He says, all purposes small well can be served by a great reservoir of water, which means whether there is a small well or a great reservoir of water, it can, you just need a little bit of water for you to drink. It can still serve the purpose. Similarly, all the purpose of the Vedas can be attained if you know what is the purpose of it. If your purpose is just drinking some water, you know where to go. Even if there is a pond, as long as it's got clean water, you would be satisfied with that, right? And that is what is explained by Krishna here. So you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits. This is the karma nevadikaraste famous verse that we just saw. So finally, he concludes this by saying, learn the art of work, right? Which is the karma nevadikara. That is, you should know how you should not be attached to the, the fruit of results. At the same time, you have to continue your, work, but, by having your faith that it will definitely produce the result that you are duly, you duly deserve, right? And that's the whole subject that is being covered there. Further, in the verses, he says, perform your duty equipoise, and then he says, keep all abominable activities distant by devotional service. And then a man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions. Now, this is a very interesting subject, again, he touches. Now, if you do, all of us know this, two things, which is punya and papa. When you perform papa, you get bad results, right? When you perform punya or auspicious activities, you get good results. Now, Krishna says here, both good and bad reactions are not good. Why so? Because if you perform good actions, what happens? You go up to the higher planetary systems. But then again, what happens? You have to come down after you have finished. Like, for example, you have a bank balance. You can only enjoy as much as the balance that is there in your bank. But when your bank balance is exhausted, you're going to be nil, right? So he says that, so you have to give up both this good and bad reactions, and you have to work in yoga. Yajnatat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. That as long as you do not perform an activity for the satisfaction of the Lord, and if you just perform it as punya or papa, it is going to bind you into this material world. And that is what he says. And this is called yoga karmashu kaushalam. This is the art of all work, right? So what are the benefits of Buddhi Yoga? To summarize, we see that it frees us from good and bad reactions, number one. It brings us freedom from the cycle of birth and death, because as I said, once we finish all the bad and good reactions, then we have no reason for us to come back into this material world. And it is, we have to become indifferent to the Vedic rituals, which is the point that he made, saying that Traigunna Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. And then realization of relationship with Krishna as eternal servitor, which is called samadhi. We have all heard this word called samadhi. When you're talking about yoga, we attain the state of samadhi. The state of samadhi means that it's actually a very interesting word, which splits into sama and dhihi. Dhihi means intelligence. Sama means equipoised or in equanimity. So when your intelligence is very stable in equanimity, and that is the state called samadhi. And why is samadhi important? Because unless you get to that state, you will not be able to meditate on anything. So you will not be able to fix your mind on anything. So with that, we are getting into section E, which is the final chapter. I know we are running a little too tight on time. I'm going to do a quick time check with Chiranjeev.
Please go ahead, Prabhu. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu.
How long you think you will need? You can.
I think
Yeah.
another 10 minutes
I think
or...
you should go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Now, finally, we come to a very interesting discussion. Now, Arjuna has observed all of those discussions that Krishna has made in terms of Sankhya, analytically explaining to him about soul, body, and everything. And then he talks about perform karma, don't be attached. And then he says, whatever activity you do, you can carry forward to your next life, Buddhi Yoga. And he gives an introduction into Buddhi Yoga and all of that. Just like all of us, having a blank face now, it's already like going to be like 10:30 in India, and it's already 8:40 here in Dubai. How does, I was, in fact, 2 days ago, I was talking to a friend of mine in a Bhagavad Gita class. This friend of mine, he was asking question. Now, Prabhu, tell me this one question, I have, and tell me the answer for this. He said, surrender, 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 devotional service, all of this you're saying. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go to office and come back and earn my money? Should I take care of my family? Should I do all of these things, or should I give this all up? Is that what is surrender? Can you please explain to me? Right? So I think this is the question that we all have. What does it really mean by Buddhi Yoga or surrender? What am I supposed to do? And this is a question that is kind of lingering in all of our hearts, right? And similar was the situation for Arjuna when Krishna said, oh, you do the activity because you have to do it, but don't get attached to the results. You will anyway get the results, and so on and so forth. Now, Arjuna is asking a question just like us. He says, okay, Krishna, can you please explain to me one thing? Now, how do I identify such a person? How does he look? Now, give me an example of a person so that I can understand this is how I have to, I need somebody whom I can follow, right? Don't just give me something that is very euphorical that I'm not able to comprehend. So he asked this question, Sthita prajnasya kabhasha samadhistasya keshava. He says, what are his symptoms? Kabhasha. What are his symptoms? How do I identify such a person who's acting it so that it's easy for me to simply follow him instead of trying to figure out everything that you said, because it's so difficult for me to get everything that you said into my head. So please give me an example, a role model that I can just follow. And that's what, Arjuna is asking. And then he says, what are his symptoms? How does he speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? These are the questions that he's asking. So what are the 4 questions that he's asking? Kabhasha, kim prabhasheta, kim ashita, kim vrajeta. He says, what are his general symptoms? How do I identify him? How does he speak? How does he sit? And how does he walk? He says. And then Krishna answers those questions, starting from the verse 2055 all the way up to the last verse, which is the verse number 72. Gives up all kinds of material desire. That is his first symptom. He is free from attachment, fear, and anger. And then he says, he is unaffected by both good and evil. And more importantly, he is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Why is he able to have no attachment, no fear, and no anger? And why is he detached from all kinds of material desire? Because he is fixed in perfect knowledge. So he has full understanding of the subject of what is permanent and what is temporary. And because he understands that, he has all these qualities, and those are his symptoms. Now the question comes, how does he sit? What does it mean? How does he generally conduct himself? When he sit, it doesn't mean that, whether he's sitting in Padmasana or he's sitting in an easy chair. How does he, some of you are relaxing in the sofa and enjoying the Bhagavad Gita. Nice to see that. So that's not the question. The question is, how does he conduct himself? Krishna is giving a wonderful example. He says, Kurmo Anghaniva. He says he withdraws his senses. That is, he's just like you. When he goes out, if he has an attraction, oh, this is a nice sweet shop. I'm crossing Puranmal. Oh, in Puranmal, you know what? These rasgullas are very nice. The gulab jamuns is something good. I should go for it. Let me just buy, stop by and buy something, right? That is what he will do. He will immediately act on it. But a person who's the Sthita Prajna, what he will do, he'll think, oh, this gulab jamun is good, but you know what? I cannot just eat it before I offer it to Krishna, because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that if I don't offer it, I'm verily eating sin. So I have to offer it. So which means I can either ask my wife to make some nice gulab jamuns that are very, very nice for Krishna, or I could help my wife to do it myself, and then we could offer it and have it. So he thinks about it. So he withdraws his senses at that moment, and he knows when to let his senses out, right? So he says, Kurmo, just like how a tortoise, when it feels danger, it will take all the limbs inside and puts it inside the shell. Similarly, when your eyes are looking at something as enjoyment, try to withdraw it and try to control yourself. How does he do that? He says, Vishaya vinirvartante niraharasya dehinah rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Now, he gives an answer. Now you've told, okay, withdraw your senses. But how do I do it? Krishna says, he gives an answer. He says, param drishtva nivartate. That is, if you taste something higher, right? The Hare Krishnas are famous for, the Govinda's restaurant. We have the Govinda's restaurant. And if you go to the temples, you have nice prasadam, wonderful. If you have been to Mumbai, Juhu, there's a whole fantastic prasadam, that you can enjoy. But if you have tasted once in that restaurant, you will, the Hare Krishna prasadam that is being served there, you will never go anywhere else. It's so tasty, right? So if you experience that higher taste once, you will never go down to something that is lower than that. But then be careful. The senses are so strong, right? They can forcibly carry you, just like how a wind can carry away a boat, right? A strong wind can carry away a boat. So be very, very careful that these senses are not easy to control. In fact, Arjuna says further in the chapters, he says, I can even control the wind, because he was Arjuna. He was capable of controlling it, right? But then to control the mind is very, very difficult. So the mind can be, what's that verse? Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati bhalavadrutam. He says, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna. Chanchala, my mind is always wavering here and there. Pramati bhalavadrutam. Vayoriva dushkaram. He says, Pramati bhalavadrutam. It is as if carrying it by force. Pramati, I just cannot, madness, it says. He explains that. Anyway, restrain senses and then fix consciousness in full control. And that can be done only through steady intelligence. But then if you don't control your senses, if you don't hold your senses, what can happen? He says, Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangaste supajayate. He talks about the 8-step process by which your mind can fall down. What is this process? It says, Dhyayato vishayan. First contemplation begins. Okay. You're going to, Meena Bazaar, you will look at, pass through that, every day, you go through that evening shop, you can see, this nice gown, is beautiful. And then the next day you go there, you'll see, nice, artwork, nice gems are all put in there. The third day you go, these colors are very nice. Yesterday they displayed this color, they have a similar one in a different color. Like that, when you constantly engage with that, when you're crossing that shop, right, you become attached to it. And then the next day, what you will do, you will enter the shop. Can I know what is the price of this? And then you will walk out and say, okay, this month, this is not in my quota. Maybe next month I should try and see. So you will try and, get some money arranged for it. And then finally you go and buy it, right? Or you might not be able to buy it. If you buy it, you're happy. If you don't buy it, you're angry. So he says, this is the process, right? Contemplation. And then as a result of that, attachment comes, and then there is the eagerness to buy. If you cannot attain it, there is anger. And what happens if you get angry? Krodha bhavati sammoha. From krodha comes sammoha, delusion. Sammoha smriti vibramaha. It bewilders your memory. And then what happens? You lose your intelligence. Buddhi nashaha. And then he said, pranashyati, everything will fall down, which means you will have absolutely no control over yourself. This is the difficulty if you don't control. And then he says, raga dvesha vimukta is to give up attachment and detachment, which means don't be too averse to something, don't be too attached to something. As much as you have to use it, you have to just use it as much as it is required. And then further he talks about the symptoms of speech as to how he controls it. He says, nasti buddhi ayuktasya, that is, by constantly being connected to Krishna, he establishes his intelligence. And when he has intelligence, there is consciousness. And when there is consciousness, there is peace. And if there is peace, there is happiness. And if connection is not there, everything is a no, 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 no. There is no intelligence, there is no consciousness, there is no peace. And finally, one does not get happiness. And finally, as we get into the last 3 verses, we see that he has a steady intelligence. What is that steady intelligence? He is fixed on the soul, whereas the materialistic intelligence is fixed on the sense objects. He is not disturbed by incessant flow of desires. And Krishna gives an example, just like when the rivers are all flowing into the ocean, but the ocean is undisturbed. You can never see that the ocean is disturbed. It's always still. So he says, that is the way that the Sthita Prajna is. And then he says, he has given up. These are the four important ones for you to, summarize and know. He's given up all objects of sense enjoyment. He's without desires. He given up all sense of possessiveness, devoid of false ego. Such a person alone can attain real peace. If he is not able to come into this, he will not attain real peace. And with that, he concludes saying that the living entity, even if he is at the time of death able to situate himself in this state of being, he will be able to, attain the supreme destination. And that is the question that Arjuna asked in the beginning of the second chapter by saying, Yash Shreyan Nischitam Bruhitanme, tell me that ultimate destination that I have to reach. And Krishna has given the whole path in the second chapter in terms of a summary. Of course, we have the entire 18 chapters, or rather, 16 chapters kind of encapsulated into the second chapter. There's an overload of analytical study of the soul, body, karma, nishkama karma, and then buddhi yoga, and finally sthita prajna. This is a lot of it. The idea of Krishna doing this is just kind of trying to provoke Arjuna that, oh, you were in indecision. Let me just first prepare your mind before I'm going to give you some interesting subject from the third chapter, Karma Yoga, wherein he's going to very elaborately talk about, the subject matter starting from the third chapter all the way up to the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. With that, we come to the end, and this is second chapter where we talked about how Arjuna was puzzled and he wanted to surrender. He surrendered unto Krishna, accepted Krishna as his guru, and Krishna started instructing. What did Krishna instruct? He instructed about his identity, that he is the soul and he is not this body. And he explains about the qualities of the soul and why, it was right on his part for him to fight as a matter of duty. So he explains Swadharma, which is a Kshatriya duty, and so also for all of us, as to whatever duties and positions that we are in, we act in it, but at the same time, we act in a way that has been explained in the Sanatana Dharma, or according to regulative principles of the Bhagavad Gita. When we do this, then we become an Atmarama, which is self-satisfied, or a Sthita Prajna. And this is the essence of the Gita from the chapter 2 as we conclude. Thank you very much. My apologies that I overrun a little bit or a little over, and we probably have a few minutes for questions, and I stop here.
Thank you, Hari Gopal Prabhu.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes, please go ahead.
It was really the essence of the second chapter. And I can see that questions are just pouring in. So yes, we welcome questions. That is the beauty of Vedic literature, Vedic culture, that everything is done through a question answer session. Yeah, and you will see from tomorrow on, when we start the third chapter, it starts with Arjuna's question. Yeah, so questions are very important. Thank you so much. So let's take one of the questions, which is how did the soul even come to existence if it is eternal? Very, very nice question. Yeah, interestingly, where I think the question has multiple parts. When you say the soul coming to existence, does it mean the original soul when we really came into existence, or when we came into the material world? So there are these multiple concepts that are there. There's a spiritual world, there's a material world. So when you say when the soul comes to existence, I think it needs to be a bit clarified as to did it come into existence in the material world or in the spiritual world? In the spiritual world, that is where we were eternal. We are existing always there. Yeah, that's how and why we say existing there. The beauty is that in the spiritual world there is no concept of time. Yeah, so there is no beginning or end. Therefore, there is no concept of coming to existence. What happens is, in the spiritual world, we actually fall down from the spiritual world to the material world. Yeah, and that is where the coming to existence aspect might be probably a beginning. That might be kind of one aspect of the answer to where we come from. Yeah. In fact, our Vedic literature has a lot of explanations on this particular aspect. and we'll deal these in detail as we go further in our next chapter. Yeah.
So the next
I
question,
think, yeah, go ahead, Prabhu. Yeah.
Mohan Prabhu, if I can take this, a very interesting one. Sthita Prajna. Can you please explain the word Sthita Prajna? Yeah. So the word Sthita Prajna can be split into two. The first part is Sthita and the other one is Prajna. The word Prajna means one who is intelligent. There's also another word called Kovida. Kovida means one who's intelligent. Narada Muni in the Srimad Bhagavatam explains about Tasheva Heto Prayateta Kovidaha, means one who's intelligent. So Prajna means intelligent, and then Sthita means steady. So Sthita Pragya means steady intelligence, and that is what is being referred to. And the whole subject matter at the end of the second chapter is about this particular person who's got steady intelligence. So that is the one. And if I might take the next one also, Mohan Prabhu, while
Yeah,
you
yeah,
go
go
for
ahead.
does the soul carry the predispositions of previous life, even if it has predispositions, and doesn't get human body? What happens to those predispositions? Very interesting question and a good question, right? Yes, the simple answer is yes, the soul does carry the predispositions of his previous life, his or her previous life. If it has predisposition and doesn't get a human body, it still carries the just to make it in simple terms, predispositions means the reactions of the karma from the previous life. It definitely carries into the next life. But when it takes a non-human body, what happens is that all of the predispositions of the previous life does not apply on the animal, because the animal has a very natural progression amongst the different species of life, right? And when he comes into the human form of life, that is when some of them fructify from the seed form into a form where it actually becomes an action or a result of an action. And that is what is described. So the answer is yes, one carries it. And in an animal form, the predispositions are kind of, so to say, parked or still in a seed state, but they don't fructify until one takes a human form, where he actually has to enjoy or suffer the reactions of his predispositions. So he waits until he gets a human body. So that's the answer.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, the interesting aspect to understand is that in the slide it was shown that the soul has a subtle covering and a gross covering. Actually, when transmigration occurs, it is explained in our Vedas that only the gross body gets left over. The soul, when it transmigrates along with the subtle body. And one aspect of the predisposition is some of the impressions of a past life actually keep also carried on along with the subtle body, that when it goes to the next life. Yeah. So that is the aspect also from a predisposition perspective, not only the karma, but also some of the impressions that you have carried on. Yeah. The three modes of nature, how they act on you, those also get carried on to your next life, actually speaking. Yeah.
One other question is, when Krishna and Arjuna spoke, was the war going on? No, the war was yet to start. I mean, they were just beginning to blow the conch shells, and then they wanted to begin the war, but Arjuna was indecisive whether he wanted to fight. And so the war did not begin. Only after the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna was convinced, he says, I have said everything that I have to say, Arjuna, according to your questions. Now he says, Yata ichasi tata kuro. You can decide now what you want to do. Do you want to fight or you don't want to fight? It is your decision. Arjuna says, whatever you have said, I will simply follow. I will fight. So he stands and he fights. So the war happens after this thing. And then the next question is, Hare Krishna Prabhu, soul is eternal, body is ever changing. Does the soul behave differently with every new body it is located in? If not, what causes the different behaviors amongst living beings? Very good question again. Now the answer is, the soul is eternal, body is ever changing. Does the soul behave differently? Yes, the soul behaves differently. Now, what are two reasons why it behaves differently? One is, we talked about the dispositions from the previous life. That is one of the reasons as to how it acts in a certain way that it has to. That's number one. Number two, Krishna says again in the Bhagavad Gita, because of our association, he says, Karanam gunasangasya saddasad yonishu. He says, because of our association, that is, our dispositions in our previous life could have been all good. It might have been the best one. But then after coming into this lifetime, if our association is not continuing to be good, and if we take bad association, there is a chance for us to decline from the dispositions of our previous life, and then we might have different behaviors because of that. That is what is being explained here. Like, for
I
example,
think,
uh, Go ahead, Prabhu. I don't want to elaborate that. I think that will take time. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think we'll probably elaborate the answers because there are quite a few, and I think there are some very interesting questions. One which I wanted to take was this law of karma should apply on one's body as the actions are done by the body. Why the soul gets affected by our karma, and why the soul has to take multiple rebirth when the actions are actually done by our body. Yeah. So interesting question. I think, like Prabhu mentioned very clearly, the body is just uh, it's like a bag of chemicals. Yeah. What really gives life to the body is the soul. Yeah. So the soul is different, the body is different. That's one clear aspect we have to understand. Yeah. Now, when the body, it doesn't act on its own. Yeah. So if I have a car and I'm driving the car, and if I go and dash somebody, the car is not punished, right? It's the driver who is punished if that particular person. So same logic also applies here. Yeah, we as the soul, we are inside sitting the body. Yeah, when I'm sitting here, Mohandas, when somebody asks me where is Mohan, like if I say here, no, this is Mohan's face. If I say this, no, this is Mohan's nose. This is Mohan's ear, Mohan's body. Where is Mohan? Yeah, so Mohan is somebody sitting inside. Yeah, and in the 15th chapter, the Lord explains that this body is like a machine. Yeah, yantra rurani maya. Yeah,
Even
yantra.
I'll go through this.
He describes the body as a yantra. Interesting, which means the body is like a machine, and the soul is inside the body who is controlling the machine. Yeah. Now, when the car doesn't get punished for the accident, the driver gets punished. In the same case, if the soul is sitting here and acting through the body, why should the body get punished rather than not the soul? Yeah, so therefore the soul has to take over the karma and take on the reactions as it goes ahead. So that's the simple analogy through which we can understand this particular aspect. Yeah.
One other question, I
Probably you
think
have to add. Yeah.
Lalita ji, she is asking a very interesting question. Soul keeps changing body as said, but what will happen to it after Kali Yuga ends? Very interesting question, right? And now, if you want the answer for the question, you would be interested in a very elaborate answer for this. Stay up for the last session. Just the penultimate
Also,
session, we are going to have a description about the Srimad Bhagavatam, which very clearly explains about how the body moves from one yuga to another, and how the yugas are all laid out, how the creation takes place and everything. So this will be a very interesting session where we will be trying to understand the whole creation, right from Krishna all the way up to how this whole thing operates.
yeah.
It's a very interesting session we'll go through. So I would urge you to please join that session, and you will definitely get an elaborate answer on that. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
Prabhu.
In fact, it's going to be touched upon in tomorrow's session. Yeah, where Krishna describes the entire the Kali Yuga cycle and what happens at each of the Kali Yuga cells. A very, very small touch up on that particular aspect. But in detail, yes, it will be on the 17th day of this particular class of the 18 days, where we will describe in detail this particular aspect. So yeah, definitely stay on.
But just not to disappoint you, the answer is yes. After Kali Yuga, then the next cycle of the yuga starts, which is the Satya, Treta, Dwapar, and Kali. Right? We have the 4 yuga cycles. Again, we go back to the body of Mahavishnu. That is why Mahavishnu also is addressed as Narayana. The word Narayana is being explained as Nara, means the summum bonum of all naras, all the living entities. And the summum bonum of all living entities, the resting place is called as Ayana. Ayana means Shayana, or Ayana means resting place. So they all rest within the body of Mahavishnu, or Karanodakshaya Vishnu, as it is explained in the Brahma Samhita and various other scriptures. So yes, the answer is they will rest there until the next creation takes place. And then I'm just trying to increase your curiosity to know this, so that you will all attend the 17th day session, so that you will get more details on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mohan Prabhu, please go ahead.
Another interesting one, which I think I saw Gauri Mataji asked, is why did Krishna create us and created this endless suffering for us to be stuck in? If we were eternal, then what wrong did we do to which we get such punishment of getting stuck? Yeah. So superb questions. People are really thinking. Fantastic. Yeah, I think you have to understand that if there is a country and the country is like super fantastic and everything is very nice, the country will still have something like a jail, yeah, sitting there. Yeah, the jail is for what? Is for people who have not following the laws of the country. Yeah. So we are also eternal. We were there in the spiritual world, and for some reason, and we don't want to go into all of those, we've done something wrong in the spiritual world, which is why we've come here into this material world for getting correct. So it is up to us. Yeah. When just to give an analogy here. Yeah. The analogy is that if a prisoner is there in the prison house, if he behaves extremely well, then he is let go early. Yeah, the same logic is there for us also. If we behave as per what the laws of karma and as per the laws of Sanatan Dharma are, then we will get out of this particular material world, and that is the aspect of liberation which Hari Gopal Prabhu touched upon in our discussion earlier. And the concept of liberation is we are a spirit soul. We are stuck in this body. I cannot come out of this body now. Yeah, I means I as the spirit soul. Yeah, and because I'm stuck in this body, I am kind of in a jail. Yeah, and how to come out of this jail is that is what the entire Bhagavad Gita is about. That is what the entire scriptures are about. Yeah, and that is where I think all of these particular aspects will come into the picture. And the question around why did Krishna create us? Yeah, so actually, if you see Krishna, our scriptures explain is also a person. Now, a person just cannot be alone all the time. He needs his friends, his relatives, his folks to be enjoyable. That is why he created us. So we were supposed to be there with the Lord, yeah, and be serving the Lord and enjoying with him. But for some reason, we have kind of disobeyed some law and we've come here. Yeah, and that is why this particular aspect has come. It's very, very short answer, but I think as you go ahead in our discussions further, this aspect will come out quite clearly. And maybe, like I said, stay on to this particular 18-day course. Subsequently, stay on to all other detailed courses that we will do, and that will really answer this question. It is a very difficult question to answer in a short time.
Mohan and Harigopal, I think we may need to stop. It is 9:09. So, from an administrator point of view, I would humbly want to tell all the devotees who are attending, thanks a lot. Wonderful questions. We will go through each one of your questions, and we will definitely make a note of it, and we will be publishing the answers. But only there could be a small gap in time, but you will have a consolidated list of all the questions and answers as we move along with the course, which you can keep it as a treasure house for you to carry on your own learnings during this course. Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Hi everyone, Hare Krishna. Just to have some wrap up comments that we wanted to make. First of all, thank everyone for attending this course and actually taking part wonderfully. We have some big numbers attending. But what we would love to do is this course is part of a community service, so we're trying to give back. So of course, we're not charging anything for the course, but what we would request is we would love if you can bring in some friends, family, people, well-wishers who you feel might find this course very useful to their spiritual practices, but also to their knowledge. So please, please, please do feel free to share this course along with family, friends, especially since you're in 2 days now. If you're worried about, well, they've missed 2 days worth of content, how will they catch up? Don't worry, we have a YouTube channel where they can catch up on completely every bit of content. Just wanted to take just a couple of seconds to share this with you. These are our social channels. Firstly, you'll see a small QR code there. If you have your phone in your hand, all you have to do is open a QR code scanner, show it in front of your screen. That will take you directly into our website where you have all the content you need, participation material. Plus, you'll also be able to get links to join all these social channels that we have, which include a WhatsApp group, which include a Telegram group as well, where we have links. All you have to do is click and it'll take you straight into the group. Why it's useful to be a part of these communication channels is we give you daily updates, announcements, but we'll also be putting some quizzes and some interesting discussion forums on these channels. So we really encourage you to be part of some one of these social media channels. You don't have to be a part of all. Of course, the left and the rightmost one, which is the Zoom and the YouTube, you're already a part of. YouTube, you have the links for. Please do go and access it. Here is one important bit I wanted to cover. It's possible that we are communicating with you via email. It's possible that even some of your family and friends have registered for the course, but maybe have not received communication. but the fact is we've actually reached out to every single person who's registered with us. So the likely occurrence is that the emails have gone to your spam or to your junk mailbox. So we'd request you to please open up the spam or junk mailbox, and you should be able to find an email from Academy of Vedic Sciences, where then you'll be able to get access to all the content. So thank you so much for everyone to be a part of this course for today. Again, please do join our channels, and please share this with your friends and family who would like to be a part of this course. All they have to do is come attend, maybe bring a notebook and a pen so you can take some notes, and it's a great learning opportunity. Thank you so much.